For years, Ilhan Omar laughed off every allegation, calling it fake, calling it political. But tonight, she got the news she dreaded most. And this time, there is no way out. What happens next will shock everyone. If you believe, the truth should always come out. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment, "Justice must be served," below. Arced with the Department of Justice seals. No one said a word. The air in that room felt like it could crack at any second. The figure stepped forward, sliding one folder across the table. The man in the middle opened it slowly, page by page, scanning every word. His eyes narrowed. He nodded once. A whisper broke the silence. "It is time." Phones were switched off. No emails, no leaks. The walls were closing in. For years, the rumors had followed her. But tonight, Ilhan Omar got the news she dreaded most. And this time, there was no one left to protect her. The night was colder than usual. Somewhere far from the noise of cameras and microphones, a single email landed in an encrypted inbox. No name, no sender, just 2 words in the subject line. "Start digging." Attached was a scanned document. Old, faded, but still clear enough to change everything. It was a marriage certificate, one that had been buried for years. The kind of paper that was never supposed to see daylight again. But someone, somewhere, had been holding onto it, waiting for the right time. Inside the Department of Justice, phones started ringing behind closed doors. The kind of calls that did not leave a paper trail. The message was clear. Ilhan Omar's past was back on the table. But this time, they were not making the same mistake. There would be no leaks, no headlines, no press conferences. A sealed federal investigation was quietly approved, completely off the record. Only a handful of people knew it even existed. Agents were pulled from other cases, reassigned under code names. Every document, every testimony, locked behind classified files. But why now? Why after all these years? Because someone inside. The system had finally spoken up. It started with an anonymous tip. One email, one file, exposing immigration documents that never made it into the public eye. The kind of proof that had been locked away, hidden by the same people who were supposed to investigate it. Voice shaking. The whistleblower left a message with the DOJ. "They buried everything, but I know where the bodies are." The clock had started ticking, but Ilhan Omar had no idea. Not yet. For years, she had laughed off the allegations, called them conspiracy theories, accused anyone who asked questions of being a racist or a liar, and the media played along, pretending like the story was nothing but smoke with no fire. But the truth never stays buried forever. Behind closed doors, federal agents were already building the case. Testimonies were being recorded in secret. Witnesses were being tracked down. The same story she spent years trying to kill was coming back to life piece by piece. The walls around her career were starting to crack, and this time, nobody was coming to save her. 2016, the year everything started. It began like most stories do. Small, quiet, easy to ignore. A few whispers floating around dark corners of the internet. Random blog posts claiming Ilhan Omar's marriage was not what it seemed. The headlines called it a far-right conspiracy. Nothing more than political attacks against one of the first Muslim women in Congress. Omar came out swinging, calling the rumors Islamophobia, a racist smear, a desperate attempt to destroy her name. And the media? They bought every word. They plastered her defense across every news channel. Case closed. But the whispers never stopped. Because behind the noise, something darker was hiding. Something that even Omar's strongest defenders could not explain. The marriage certificates, they were real. 2 different names, 2 different men, 2 different timelines. That never added up. The documents showed Ilhan Omar had married one man, while still living with another. But it was not just about 2 marriages. It was about who the second man was. His name was Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi, a name buried in Somali record, a man who vanished as quickly as he appeared. But there was one detail they could not hide. Ahmed Elmi shared the same father's name as Ilhan Omar, brother or not. The papers told a story nobody wanted to touch for years. The media dismissed the whole thing as a misunderstanding. They said there was no proof, no credible witnesses, nothing solid to back up the claims. But then, someone started talking. Abdi Hakim Osman, a respected figure in the Somali community, sat down for an interview in 2020, his voice calm. But his words shook everything. Everybody knew. Ilhan married her brother. He was not guessing. He was not speculating. He was there. He watched it happen with his own eyes. He claimed it was a known secret in the Somali community, a quiet arrangement to help her brother get into the United States. Omar's team scrambled, calling Osman a liar, an attention seeker. But Osman never backed down. The media tried to bury his testimony under layers of fact checks and spin, but they could not explain why he never changed his story. More witnesses followed. Neighbors, friends, people who claimed they had always known, but they were too afraid to speak, afraid of what might happen if they told the truth. For years, the pieces were scattered, the story kept alive only by whispers and rumors. But now, those same whispers had found their way into the hands of federal investigators. Every forgotten testimony, every buried document, was being pulled back into the light. The walls around Ilhan Omar's secret life were starting to crumble. And this time, there was nowhere left to hide. If this story is opening your eyes right now, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us, should powerful people be above the law? For years, this story had been buried alive. It was not that the proof was never there. The documents existed. The witnesses were ready. The whispers had been circling for almost a decade. But every time the truth got close, something or someone slammed the door shut. Ilhan Omar called it racism, political attacks, a desperate attempt to bring down a rising star. The media echoed her words without question. They fact-checked the story to death, never asking why nobody was investigating it for real. But now, insider leaks from the Department of Homeland Security have exposed why that investigation never happened. It was never about the truth. It was about protection. High-level officials inside DHS claimed there were orders from above, warnings to back off, to treat the allegations as nothing more than right-wing conspiracy theories. They were told it would be political suicide to even open a file on Ilhan Omar. The documents, the testimonies, everything was buried under layers of bureaucracy. Every agent who tried to dig deeper was quietly reassigned. Every whistleblower who tried to speak up was told to forget what they saw. For years, Omar walked the halls of Congress with a shield around her, a silent agreement that some people were simply untouchable. But the system can only hide the truth for so long. Behind the scenes, something had finally shifted. The sealed federal investigation was not supposed to exist. It was not supposed to happen at all. But someone inside the DOJ broke the rules. Someone who had seen too much for too long. No press releases, no announcements, no leaks to the media. It was happening quietly, deliberately, waiting for the right moment to explode. The case files were growing, page by page, name by name. Agents were knocking on doors at night. Phone records were being pulled without anyone knowing. Ilhan Omar had no idea the storm was already circling around her. For years, she was protected. But when the system finally cracks, it does not matter how powerful you are. The truth always finds a way out. Inside Ilhan Omar's office, the lights stayed on long after midnight. The blinds were pulled shut. Phones vibrated against wooden desks, non-stop, carrying the kind of news nobody was supposed to know yet. Behind closed doors, whispers turned into panic. Her closest advisors gathered in silence, faces pale. Eyes locked on their screens. The walls felt smaller, the room colder. Emails were flying back and forth. Short messages, no details, just two words repeating over and over. Not yet. But deep down, they all knew it was happening. For years, they had played this game, bury the story, discredit the witnesses, drown the truth in headlines about racism and political attacks. And every time, it worked. But this time, something was different. The investigation was no longer just rumors on social media or blog posts from independent journalists. This was coming straight from the Department of Justice, sealed, silent, and unstoppable. Her lawyers were already scrambling, drafting statements they had not released yet. Phone calls were made at 2 in the morning. Private investigators were hired to track down who leaked what. But no matter how hard they tried, it was too late. The cracks were already showing inside the Somali community in Minneapolis. The whispers had started again. People who once stayed silent were finally speaking up, quietly, anonymously. But they were speaking. One source from inside Omar's own team sent out a message to a journalist. 4 simple words that changed everything. Ilhan knows. They finally got to her. Every meeting behind those office doors ended with the same question. How much do they know? The truth. They know everything. The marriage certificates, the hidden immigration documents, the whistleblowers they thought would never speak. Every piece of the puzzle was finally coming together. They were hoping for one thing, that nobody would ever find out. But the worst part was, Ilhan Omar knew this day was coming. For years, she walked through the halls of Congress with her head held high, smiling, laughing, pretending like the story was nothing but gossip. But behind that smile, she was always waiting for the knock on the door. Now the knock was getting louder. The investigation was moving in silence, but the whispers inside her own circle were screaming louder than ever. They could not stop what was coming anymore. All they could do now was wait. If this story is touching your heart right now, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. For years, the proof was always there, hidden in plain sight. It was never a matter of if the story was true. It was about who was brave enough to tell it. Behind closed doors, the investigation was moving faster than anyone imagined. Witnesses were being called in, one by one. The first name on the list, the Christian minister. He was the man who had quietly officiated the marriage between Ilhan Omar and Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, the man believed to be her own brother. For years, he refused to speak. He disappeared from the public eye, leaving behind nothing but rumors. But federal investigators found him. No cameras, no press, just one meeting, inside a small office. Away from the noise, with shaking hands, he signed a sworn affidavit, confirming what so many had suspected. Yes, I was the one who married them. His voice broke as he spoke. I did not know who they really were at the time. The papers were filed, locked away in evidence folders, hidden from the public, but now in the hands of federal investigators. But that was not all. In the Somali community of Minneapolis, whispers were turning into statements. 3 family members had come forward, signing their own sworn affidavits. They confirmed everything. Ilhan Omar was already married to Ahmed Hirsi in a religious ceremony, years before she ever signed legal documents with Ahmed Elmi. The marriage with Elmi was not about love. It was about papers. One family member wrote, "Everybody knew, but nobody wanted to talk." Even Somali community leaders, the same people who defended her for years, were quietly admitting the truth behind closed doors. They had always known, but the pressure to stay silent was too powerful. But now, they were finally speaking, piece by piece. The puzzle was coming together. Federal agents were cross-checking names, timelines, signatures. The same marriage certificate that the media called fake in 2016 was now being matched to immigration records. Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi's name, his birth date, his immigration status. All of it traced back to one woman, Ilhan Omar. The documents showed something that nobody could deny anymore. Ahmed Elmi's entire legal status in the United States was built on that one marriage. And the worst part? The papers were never supposed to be found. They were buried under layers of sealed files, lost in the cracks of a broken system. But someone inside the DHS had kept copies, waiting for the day the truth would finally matter. Now, those same documents were locked in evidence boxes, sitting in the hands of federal investigators. Ilhan Omar's defenders could spin the story all they wanted. They could call it a conspiracy, a smear, a political attack, but nobody could deny what was on paper. The proof was there, signed, stamped, filed, and this time there was no way to bury it again. The walls around Ilhan Omar were falling faster than ever before. The investigation was no longer built on whispers. It was built on evidence. And now, the truth was finally out of her hands. By the time the investigation had begun, the media already knew. But they stayed silent. CNN, MSNBC. All the major networks acted like nothing was happening. Night after night, they filled their headlines with political drama and celebrity scandals, pretending like the story did not exist. But outside those studio walls, the truth was spreading like wildfire. On Twitter, one word started trending without warning. Ilhan Gate at first. Nobody knew where it started, but within hours, screenshots of sealed documents started leaking online. Copies of the marriage certificates, immigration files, even small parts of the whistleblower testimonies, all hitting the internet at once. People were sharing the documents faster than they could be deleted. Thousands of comments, millions of views. The same media that spent years covering for Ilhan Omar was now desperately trying to ignore what everyone was already seeing with their own eyes. Whistleblowers were stepping forward, not on national TV, but on small independent platforms and anonymous podcasts. One by one, they were exposing what they had seen behind closed doors. A former DHS agent spoke out, his voice altered to hide his identity. We were told to back off. Every time we got close, the case would disappear. Another source from Minneapolis's Somali community leaked a private message. They knew. We all knew, but we were too afraid to talk. But the one network nobody was talking about, Fox News. They were not saying much, not yet. But behind the scenes, their top reporters were already preparing exclusive coverage. Interviews were being lined up. Secret meetings were happening. In hotel rooms, they were waiting for one thing, the first official arrest. The fallout had already begun, but Ilhan Omar's team stayed silent. No statements. No press conferences, just panic behind locked doors, watching the walls close in. Inch by inch, they knew there was no stopping what was coming next, because this time, the truth was not coming from politicians or the mainstream media, it was coming from the people. They could not bury the truth, so now they were trying to hide the fallout, but it was too late. The cracks were already wide open, and the whole world was starting to watch. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us, who was the unsung hero in your life? The sun was setting over Washington, D.C., but inside Ilhan Omar's office, the air felt heavier than ever before. The blinds were shut tight. The room was dead silent. Only the soft ticking of a wall clock echoed through the space. Her staff sat frozen at their desks, eyes locked on their computer screens, pretending like nothing was happening. But everyone in that room felt it. Something was coming. The hallway outside was quiet, until it was not. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the wooden door. Slow, steady, like they were meant to be heard. Nobody moved. For a moment, it was like time had stopped. Ilhan Omar sat behind her desk, staring at the door, her heart pounding inside her chest. She knew what was waiting on the other side. She had always known this day would come. With shaking hands, she reached for the pen in front of her, gripping it tight, like it was the only thing holding her together. The knocks came again, louder this time. One of her aides finally stood up, slowly walking toward the door. He opened it just a crack, but the second he saw who was standing there, his face went pale. FBI. 2 agents stood in the doorway, dark suits, badges hanging from their necks, their faces cold and unreadable. Without saying a word, they handed over a sealed envelope, official subpoena. The aide's hands trembled as he carried the letter across the room, placing it on Ilhan Omar's desk. Nobody said a word. All eyes were on her. For years, she told the world there was nothing to investigate. She called the rumors lies, political attacks, hate-fueled conspiracies. But now, the letter was right in front of her, signed by the Department of Justice. Her hands shook as she broke the seal, unfolding the papers inside. The room felt smaller with every word she read. Her breath caught in her throat. They finally got to her. Behind the walls of Capitol Hill, the truth was no longer just whispers or rumors. It was a federal case. Her staff sat frozen, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to tell them it was all a mistake. But she stayed silent, because deep down, she knew there was no way out this time. The papers in her hands were not just words on a page. They were the first crack in the shield that had protected her for years. For the first time, Ilhan Omar was not in control. The same woman who spent her career lecturing the world about justice was finally about to face it, herself. The walls around her career were falling, and there was nothing left to hide behind. They thought this day would never come. They thought the system would protect her forever. But the truth always finds a way. The camera shutters would start clicking soon. Reporters would flood the hallways. The headlines would write themselves. But behind closed doors, Ilhan Omar sat in silence, reading the words she had spent years trying to avoid. Subpoena for federal investigation. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded. Because when the truth finally came knocking, even she could not ignore it anymore. For years, Ilhan Omar walked through the halls of Congress, untouchable, protected by the system, shielded by the media. Every rumor, every accusation, buried before it could ever see the light of day. They called it conspiracy. They called it hate. They called it nothing. But the truth was never nothing. Behind every whisper, there was proof. Behind every document, there was a story. And behind every cover-up, there was a system built to protect the powerful, while regular Americans paid the price. Now, the cracks have finally started to show. No matter how high they rise, no matter how protected they are, the truth always finds a way. It may take years. It may be buried deep. But it never stays hidden forever. This is just the beginning, because if a regular American did what Ilhan Omar is accused of, they would already be deported. Coming soon, the investigation Ilhan Omar never wanted you to know about. The walls are closing in, and this time, there is nowhere left to hide. If this truth matters to you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment. No one is untouchable.